It's really nice to have so many people joining us. Virtual trainings are something that a lot of us have done over the past 2.5 years. And some things have worked well, some things maybe didn't work well. And so with Susan, she's kind of kicking off one of the things that she did during her virtual trainings. And next week we have Todd, who's going to talk about some of the things that he learned doing virtual trainings as well. If anybody else has things to share, especially after these two sessions, I think it would be great if we continue on this topic. So please sign up if after Todd and Susan something inspires you or you want to share something that you did during virtual trainings that the rest of us could find super helpful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan. And so thank you, Susan. Let me know if you need any help at all. I will be putting in some links that Susan has sent to me in advance so that you can check them out yourself. And I'll also be monitoring the chat. So take it away, Susan.
Okay, and tagging on to what Jen just said, when you open those copies, if you have any problems opening them, definitely just shoot me an email and I'll make sure the share settings are corrected. Although I think I've got several of them set to immediately prompt you to copy, and the others you should at least be able to view. And I would encourage you to make your own copy of everything. Because if you just start changing what you open, if it's not a copy, you're going to change it for everybody if you're not already familiar with Google Documents. So I am going to stop my video I have pretty good streaming internet here, but we'll go on and share my screen. And I am going to go to Google Chrome. So I had the opportunity a little less than 2 years ago to train the staff at the elementary school where I've worked for the last 5 years. I trained them 2 hours a day on a number of platforms, most of them Globe platforms. And I'm going to go over here. Are we all good on seeing that? Okay.
All good. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And I'm not at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to focus mostly today on Google Classroom and Google Forms. My name is Susan James, and I represent the Nuhop Center for Experiential Learning. It is what many would call CAMP. It's an environmental education program that also does specialized programs in the summer for children with special needs. And they definitely are expanding. They've just acquired a second camp for their program. So they're a very active program. So I am a Globe Partner, trainer, and teacher. I started in 2011. Kevin Sikowski's Globe, it wasn't really Globe Mission Earth at that time, I don't think. But I traveled to Peoples with Donna Shepard and up to Toledo with Kevin Sikowski in 2011, and I was sold. I knew this was an excellent program. My background is mechanical engineering. That's what my degree is in. And I just really love, I'm a science nerd, to put it quite succinctly. I mean, you can't describe it really hardly any other way. I do have over 20 years of experience in non-formal education and formal education combined. So about 15 plus in non-formal resident environmental education. And then the last 5 years, I've worked at an elementary school, St. Peter's Elementary School in Mansfield, Ohio. And that is about an hour north of Columbus, an hour south of Cleveland, not too far off of I-71, if you're familiar with Ohio. On the side, I also am a field manager for a lake water monitoring program with the Ohio Lakes Management Society. So my background's pretty diverse. I've got the mechanical engineering, and then I've got a lot of earth science background with the other things that I've done in my life. And I haven't answered that question yet. No, I have not flown a drone. Just never really had the opportunity to. So I'll have to seek that out to find out where I can borrow one here in Ohio. So the Google products that I think are most useful for globe training would be Forms, Classroom, Sites, Google Sites, Jamboard, and Google Keep. For those of you that are more familiar with Apple products, Keep is very similar to Notes. Jamboard allows an interactive platform to where multiple users can add, contribute to each slide at the same time. And Sites is a way to create a website. Forms is just what it sounds like. It can be in the form of a quiz, but more useful for Globe, it would be surveys. And then Google Classroom is what most teachers using a Google School use to push out all of their assignments. So I'm going to focus mostly on Google Forms and Google Classroom. I will be going in and out of this slide set to show you some examples of forms and an example of the classroom we used last year for our virtual training. So Google Forms, I do have, as I just said, an example of registration forms and also an example of an evaluation form. It can also be used for a daily session exit ticket. Most of my trainings have been done in conjunction with Globe Mission Earth. And one of the things that we like to do on a daily basis is have our participants reflect on the day or ask a question, which again is an indication of reflecting on what they've experienced that day. So it would be very easy to create an exit ticket. And one of the advantages that I find for Google Forms is that you can export all of your data from the forms into a spreadsheet very easily. So I'm going to slip out of here and go over to a cheat sheet that I'm making available to you. So last year, 2 years ago in August, when I provided the PD for our staff at the school, I created these cheat sheets basically in a bulleted format that will give you some information, just highlights of how to use the application. With Google Forms, you do need to pay attention to all of your settings, and I'll show you that here in a moment. Make sure that you've given it a name so that you can easily find that in your Google Drive. Everything that you do Google, you will be able to find in your Google Drive. When you create a survey, from my experience, I've always liked to collect email addresses. And I generally make every question mandatory, although there are definitely circumstances under which you do not want to make every question mandatory, because sometimes folks just don't have anything to say regarding a particular question. Participants usually like to see a progress bar so that they understand just how much longer they're going to have to answer questions. And generally speaking, it's probably not going to be a quiz for a Globe training. However, you never know when something like that, you might want to just have a quick tell me what you know type of quiz, like not graded. And so I'm going to go on into the application form that we used last year. And this is a copy of it, so you're not going to see any responses. Once you create your application, you'll actually go into the send button in the upper right-hand corner and choose how you want to send the form out to everyone. You can either send it out by email with a link or embed it into, let's say, a website. You are not going to share the link to, you do not ever want to share the link in the Omnibar with your participants. The proper way to share it with, let's say, a co-presenter would be to go into adding collaborators. That would be the proper way to share anything Google Forms. And when you want to send it to someone to be completed, that's when you use the send button. So in Google Forms, the cool thing about Google Forms is you can set up different sections. And those sections can be, you can refer people to different sections depending on what their answer might be. But this is the form that I set up for our Globe Mission Earth training last year. And I like to know a lot about the teachers that I'm going to be training. So I ask a lot of questions about their background, what grades they teach. And I did base this off of an existing form that Globe Mission Earth had been using as well. So you can see in this form, each of the sections just literally goes on to the next section. There's no skipping around. So you will have access to this. I only ask that you go into, and you go up here to the three dot. We in education, elementary education anyways, we call that the snowman or the hot dog. So if you go into that menu, and just the very top choice is make a copy. And so make a copy for yourself, give it a name that you want. If you're not familiar with Google, this folder icon allows you to put it into whatever file folder that you wish. If you want to be able to find it very easily, go on and star it. So you'll have a copy of this, or can make a copy of this to use for your trainings if you wish. Now, in terms of a post-training evaluation, there are two of them that I have. And basically the short one is an edited version of the long one. And you'll notice that the long one has 14 sections and the short, I think, had like 9. Yeah, 9. And so this also asks, if they've attended a previous Globe training, because that can kind of affect a person's outlook on what they've just experienced. If they've never been to a Globe training, my experience is they're pretty overwhelmed. So you can kind of expect various answers depending on a person's experience with Globe. And so this particular one, I've got all of the typical, I hesitate to use that word typical, but the typical protocols are listed in here. So some of you might be wondering how I can tell it where to go based on, okay, so I've got this set of questions and I can tell it by using this add section. To add a section, I can tell it to add videos to a question or an image, can change, add a title or description. I can also even import questions from another Google form, and the plus sign is adding a question. If I have a question here, and it looks like there's a blank question, let's move this up here. So I'm going to go here, and if whatever this question is, if I have, let's say, a yes or no choice. And things are very slow right now. And then it auto-populates another choice. Okay, I can go to my snowman menu or hot dog menu, and I can tell it that based on the answer to go to a different section. I can also shuffle the option orders, but I would recommend that you not do that on your surveys. So that is when you're actually in the question, how you can tell it to go to a different section based on the answer. Any questions so far? I don't want to like wait till the very end, I guess. And I'm gonna see, thank you, Jen, for putting that out. Okay, so everything is still good with questions. I just checked the chat. So I assume there's no questions.
Susan, I don't have a question, but I just added a comment in the chat for you about embedding the NASA media release form into Google Forms, registration forms. We found that to be super handy now.
Okay, great. So you would just embed it as a link. Yes? Or is the
wording
form
from the
itself
form?
a form?
It's another section.
Just another section.
Okay. So you've put all of the questions of the NASA release form into the form.
Yeah, and then they just add their initials to agree.
That's a great idea. I'm
And
glad you added that.
And we've done that for students also that
Yeah.
present at the virtual symposium. The parents have to log in and read the description, and then again, like Sarah said, initials, and that gives us the permission to have them recorded.
Awesome. So that's just a perfect example of how when a new use comes up, it's very easy to edit these forms and just add what you need or take away what you need. So like if I decided I did not need that particular section, I just hit the trash can and make it go away. This right here, this symbol, I'm trying to think of the platform. Moto, I'll find it. But that allows me to record my voice to read what's on that question. And from a standpoint of making things accessible, that's why I used it. I had a lot of students that needed that extra access to the information. And that's icon right here just helps us to duplicate the exact same question, to maybe change it just a little bit. I chose to go with a linear scale for a lot of the questions, just so that we wouldn't have to type a lot of answers, answer choices, when a linear scale works just fine. Okay, so the shorter template is basically the same thing with fewer protocols in it. It was edited to better fit what we did last summer. I created the master and then edited that as a copy and took the irrelevant questions out. Okay, going on to Google Classroom. If there's no questions about Google Forms, and just digest that a little bit if you wish. I'm not sure how many of you are super familiar with Google Classroom. The Globe Mission Earth team, we spent a lot of time determining best practices for our purposes anyways, during the early summer 2020. And then have just edited and copied ever since then what we did that summer. So Google Classroom, let me go over to my, okay, so Google Classroom, I like that as a searchable one-stop shop. I know that Sarah has also used Google Sites to push out her content at times. I've used Google Sites multiple times, and I can, if we have time, even skip over to that topic. But Google Classroom is searchable if you use the Control F function. And you can search anything in a certain page of that classroom. Google Classrooms can be copied to maintain the same content, but offer it to a new group if you're not wanting to just add people to the existing Google Classroom. There's a way to just put materials on, so it's not like an actual assignment. And if your teachers need to use Google Meet, because there are some school districts that do not allow Zoom, you can generate a Google Meet with Google Classroom. Going on, I'm going to go on and finish this out just to make sure you do have a copy of this, and my contact information is here on the last slide. And if you like the slide design, I got that from Slides Mania, if you're not familiar with that. Giving credit where credit is due. So there's the cheat sheet for Google Classroom. Here is the Google Classroom that we used last year. And so in Google Classroom, you're going to notice a master menu for you can see all of your classes. You can see a calendar for when different things, different tasks are due. And you can see all of your classrooms. Now, these are not all of my classrooms because a lot of mine are actually archived. So one thing I want to stress to you, if you're going to use a Google Classroom to provide materials to your participants, When you're finished, let's say you're thinking you really don't want this classroom anymore, you're not going to delete it, you're going to archive it. So if I were to go in here into classes, on this 3-dot menu, I could tell it to archive. There's not even an option to delete it. If you were to archive that, then it's not not present on your screen, but you can still access your archived classes. This is something a lot of people don't quite realize. It's not really going to take up that much space on your drive to just archive it, because I have found many times I want to go back and see what I did in a previous year or in a different class. And all you have to do then is just click on the 3-dot and tell it to restore it. You can also copy or move things within that. So going back to here, another important point for Google Classroom is that when you create a Google Classroom and you go into your Google Drive, I was not thinking about showing Google Drive, but I think I will. When you go into your Google Drive, Google automatically creates a folder called Classroom. And you do not want to mess with that folder. You want to just leave it alone, because the Google Classroom app uses that folder. So if you start adding things to that folder or deleting things from that folder, you're really going to hurt yourself in terms of your Google Classroom. So just leave that folder alone. And so we have the stream, which is more of a place to make announcements for your class. You can attach materials to that. So if I'm wanting to announce something, I can tell it which classroom, and I can choose multiple classrooms if I want to. I can choose specific participants. I can announce that. I can add anything as a link, or upload a file from my laptop's files, or add it from Google Drive. I can add a YouTube video and make an announcement. I can also, well, it's not going to let me here, but by using the down arrow, I can schedule when I want that to come out. So I've preferred to keep Stream just as a place for announcements, and classwork just as a place for tasks that need to be completed. And so I have moved the post-workshop topic towards the top, so that was the first thing that my participants saw. You can literally just drag and drop each of these topics. So the topics are like a header, and then your assignments or materials go underneath that by, let me open one of these so you can see that. Under the instructions, it really does not like being on Zoom and doing this. But under the instructions, you can see what topic has been assigned to. And I can go in and edit that if I wanted to change it to a different topic. So when I set up an assignment or a task, again, I can tell who I want it to go to, what topic it needs to be under down here. And there's also a grade category, which I also put as pre-workshop, so I could see all of my pre-workshop tasks together. I cannot imagine why we would want any grades for anything on a Globe training, but each to their own. When it needs to be turned in, some of you might be interested, especially in higher ed, maybe a rubric, so that everybody understands what you are looking for in the task. And the rubrics are pretty easy to set up with just a criterion and descriptions and point values, so that they see, and the point values obviously are more for grading, but if you have that rubric, that helps your participant to understand more what you're looking for. And then again, just like in the stream, you can add all sorts of documents to, or links to your task. You can even attach brand new docs, slides, sheets, drawings, and forms. And if I would choose any of those, it would open up that app and allow me to create what I want to have attached. So you can do it all in one step if that's what your preference is. I'm going to go out of here. Okay, under people, this is where you're going to add. If you have somebody's email address, you can just add them and it will send an invitation to that person at that email address. Now, one thing that we have found is that we really need participants to use a personal Gmail account in order to guarantee that we can add them. If you are using a work account and it's a Google account under your work domain, sometimes opening, whitelisting another domain will work. I actually have Google admin access and played around with that extensively and did not have 100% success on getting people in when they were on a work domain. So you'll have way more success just having your participants use a regular personal Gmail account. And so that was our participants last year. And we had quite a few. We added my NASA data with Elizabeth Joyner, and Barbie Buckner joined us too. So I was able to add them as teachers so they could see what we're doing to better plan what they were going to present for us. And then under grades, it's really, if they're not graded, it's just telling you whether somebody has turned in the task so that you know that you need to go look at it. And in settings, let me take you on over to settings. You can change the name of your class. You can tell it to manage the invite codes and links. Your class code is listed there. The class code is also in the header for the Google Classroom, and I'll point that out here in a moment. On the stream, you can set it up to whether your participants can post and comment, or only your presenters can post or comment. That's probably not so much an issue with our adult globe trainings. It is very handy for students that want to just chat with each other using that. Classwork on the stream, I've got that hidden because, again, I think it just kind of makes the stream harder to read. I like to maintain the stream just as a place for announcements. But you can show everything on the stream if that's what your preference is. And here's where you get a meet link and the grading, which really does not apply so much to us. And if you have any questions, go on, and I'm fine with interruptions. When I first go into here, if I click on that information button, the class code is going to pop up. So that's where you can find the class code as well. If you want to put your own background, you can customize very easily with that as well. Okay. I'm gonna go back out of here and join you. Okay, any questions? I mean,
Sarah
things
has
seem
one
very
here.
straightforward to me. If you've not used Google Apps much, might not feel so straightforward to you.
Sarah asked, do you create a different calendar for each classroom?
It automatically creates a calendar for each classroom. And then you as the teacher will see an overview of all the classroom calendars. And it even populates onto your Google Calendar for the account that you're using. I am struggling to get it to open Zoom all the way up. I've got a little bit of you. Anybody interested in taking a look at Google Sites? I'm not sure who's presenting again next week. Todd, right?
Todd. Are there any other questions about what Susan has presented here?
That was a real fast tour through both of those. I mean, I spent about 2 hours on each of them with our staff and probably could have spent a lot more than that even. It's a quiet group.
So I have a question. So I know that Google, a lot of schools have Google as their kind of framework.
Mm-hmm.
And then so my university does not generally use Google. It uses Microsoft OneDrive. And so if I'm just wondering about teachers accessing, is it easier for them because they are using what their schools are using? Or if they use something else, would they prefer it in that? I'm just wondering, like in general, do people find that Google and Google Classroom is what everybody's using, or are they using other things? Because I
Well,
think there's Canvas, there's a lot of different platforms out there. And so I'm just wondering what people are, how they're choosing what to use,
right.
essentially.
If a teacher is working at a school that is using Google Apps, it's probably easier for them. I know that at times when I've needed to, what's the Zoom equivalent for Microsoft meetings? Something, whatever.
Teams.
Teams.
Blech,
There it is.
I
Teams.
hate
Yes.
Teams. I hate
I
Teams.
was going to say I have had trouble connecting to any Teams meeting. I mean, to the point where I just said, sorry, guys, I'll talk to you in person later. So with that said, I mean, like I said, there are some schools that if they are a Google school, that's what they expect the teacher to use. I have the luxury of working, having worked at a private school and a little more leeway on what I use. We used Google Classroom as a means of pushing out our assignments, but our actual management system was something else altogether that synchronized with Google Classroom. I think I like the fact that a personal Gmail account is all a person needs in order to participate using the Google Classroom. I'm not sure how do people, I've not used Microsoft as a platform. I've read a little bit about it on social media posts, but I don't really have much experience with Microsoft or the other platforms.
Yeah, we just use SharePoint, which is more
Okay.
like a Google site.
Yeah.
And it's really awesome. Our site that we designed for a teacher workshop, well, it was actually a partner workshop, was really great and easy to use. I guess my concern about this, and I mean, this is just something that I have, there's that whole thing about ownership of Google. So with UCAR is at GIO, GIO is at UCAR, and they use Google, right? So that Google Drive is internal to UCAR. So I'm just wondering how schools feel about, again, and how partners feel about using things like Google with their personal account versus an organization account. And ownership and all of those implications, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and at my last, when I worked in environmental ed, we used mostly Microsoft products, and my son was actually a volunteer IT for us, and he had a SharePoint, I guess I'll call it a site, set up for us to use. I think having used both, see, I haven't used SharePoint recently. I'm not sure what add-ons they've, improvements they've made over the last 5 to 6 years. I like how easy it is to share a file with everybody. I mean, if I want to share a Google file that I've created, it's pretty easy for me to share that, whether it's my personal account or the work account. I like that, I've just moved a lot of my files from my St. Peter's account using Google Takeout over to my own personal account. That was pretty seamless. Now, the downside is a lot of schools' ITs don't have Takeout turned on. So if they're using a work account, they're going to have trouble taking those files home that maybe they've created. A lot of the things that I've created, including what you guys are getting here today, I've done on my own time. The Google Sites I've created have been done on my own time. So I really don't have a good solid answer for you, Jen. I'm sorry. I think polling your participants to see what platforms they have access to, more ready access to, might be a good thing, maybe in that registration form to include that as a question. And then you'd have a better idea. If you have access to both, you'd have a better idea of what you want to use.
yeah, I guess I would love, so if everyone could maybe use the thumbs up, thumbs down. So I did not realize this until I hired Alicia, and I had to read all this paperwork about hiring Alicia and IT. And one of the things that we went down the rabbit hole on is my university has this little line that says that if you use an outside vendor that is not university approved, you have to get special permission. So that means that in reality, my university wants me to use my Zoom university account, my OneDrive, and Microsoft products because that is what we're contracted with. So things that I do on Google
Gotcha.
I should have permission to have them on Google, right? From my university. So I'm just wondering if anybody else has run into that. So thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't even know if there's like a reaction where there's like, oh, I didn't even know about that. So I would love to see like some
Yeah, I'm guessing if I
people
had worked
could
at a
do
public
that.
school, if I had worked at a public school, I would not have been able to add apps as I did. To be able to use like the Microsoft Teams or whatever. I was able to add those apps to my devices, but a public school probably would not have allowed that.
So I saw at least 2 thumbs up there
I
with
think I saw
Larissa,
3.
and
Yeah.
you saw 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yep, NASA has a lot of restrictions. So paying for Zoom. Yeah, so I just wonder if it's something that we should be, you know, thinking about, because I'm just, anyway, does anybody else have any comments on that? Because other than maybe our federal partners, because I definitely know, okay, so Sarah, the SharePoint, but you've been using Google. Yeah,
Oh,
so I
Janet
definitely
had
know
a
the
good point.
federal partners have an issue with that for sure.
Yeah.
So what has helped us, because our clientele, most of the teachers were familiar with Google and used it. That is one of the reasons why we used Google Classroom. Now, way back in 2016, when Globe Mission Earth was funded, we would create the training on a Google site just because it was so much easier for us to do, Sarah and Kevin and I, to do it as a group. rather than working in any other platform way back when. And it was a learning curve because, you know, most of us haven't done this kind of IT stuff. Or we don't have access to a person on campus that would be able to do it for us.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
looks like Todd has a hand.
I just wanted to say that of all the schools I've worked with, almost none of them have made Microsoft Teams their platform of choice. And we kind of have to use that at NASA, but if I'm going to do some kind of a training, that's one of the first questions I'll ask. And I never say, or never get an answer of, oh yeah, we can use Teams or we like Teams. So it's kind of one of those that, and I'm kind of in your situation, Jan, that, you know, if I'm doing something for work, yes, I'm on Teams. If I'm doing something for anybody else, any public school or anybody else, I'm on Zoom or some other platform, which is kind of a pain.
Yeah. So my son works for Nationwide Children's Hospital, and when all of the Zoom classroom stuff started in spring of 2020, he had indicated that Nationwide Children's was very strict about what platforms they could use, and Google was not one. And that was just their determination from a security standpoint. Between Zoom and Google, they did not use any of those. In fact, I'm pretty sure they were using Microsoft, just like you just mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, couple cents from me. I am in a nonprofit world, working with different countries, and I am not in a position of dictating any school district what system they should use. So I guess I am in the world of accepting whatever it is that they're using and adjusting to the environment. So, but I just want to say to Susan, thank you for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I wanna react to the conversation topic. This is not of anybody's fault from educational side side of the things, because companies are, and I came to education from engineering and guilty as charged. Companies are really, the Google was among the first to really occupy the market. And then when Microsoft realized that they are late to the game, they added a lot of new features and decided to really beat Google and things of that nature. So as a result, we have two beautiful buildings right next to each other here in Cambridge. One building is Microsoft, another building right there is Google. So anyway, it's not of the fault by any educator in any country, starting from US. It's just we are put in this position to use it, and in the corporate world as well. Whatever it is that we are responsible for according to the corporate agreement, that's what you go by. So anyway, it's really sort of a messy world in terms of adapting to whatever technology is out there, but hopefully soon we will have a little bit more options and a little bit more clarity, because there is a huge competition still between all of these companies, and I hope in this competition who will win is us educators. So I guess my bottom line is thank you to Susan for being so patient with us, and you did a fantastic job presenting to all of us. Thank you to Jennifer for really asking a very good questions, because we all have these questions in our mind. We're all in this together, so there is no one size fits all, and there is no magic solution. We just have to really help each other, and that's all. So thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you all.
Thanks, Larissa.
All right. Well, this sounds like we need to have a continuing conversation as things develop. I do want to, I acknowledge that it's 2 minutes after the hour, whatever hour you're at. We have people dropping off because they have their next meetings, or it could be the end of the workday. So I just want to thank Susan for the presentation. It was great. I'm really looking forward to Todd's next week as well. I think that, again, think about what's happening with these things, with these virtual trainings and what tools you're using, because I think that this is a great opportunity for us to learn from each other. When I heard Todd was doing so many presentations and Susan was doing so many virtually and everyone was doing things virtually, I asked specifically for everybody I knew who was doing virtual trainings to present. So if we could, again, now that everyone's breathing a little easier, maybe think about what you learned and sign up for a water cooler, that would be awesome. And I just want to also let you know that I will be sending out the links. We'll make sure that you have those links after this presentation, and this will be posted on our YouTube channel. So with that, thank you again, Susan. Thank you everyone for coming. It was so good to see you.